The night was impossibly still. Private First Class Price, stationed on perimeter duty at Fort Echo, shuffled his feet to stay warm as the temperature dipped. His shift was the graveyard slot, midnight to 4 in the morning, and the darkness seemed thicker here than anywhere else on the sprawling base. Fort Echo, nestled in the desert's heart, was an enigmatic outpost, its purpose shrouded in rumors. Price had overheard whispers from other soldiers, secret experiments, strange cargo, and unmarked helicopters that came and went without a sound. The perimeter was lined with towering floodlights that should have pierced the night, but tonight their glow seemed muted, as if the shadows themselves were pushing back. Price tightened his grip on his M4, the cold steel grounding him in the present. He didn't believe in the wild stories the others told around the barracks, tales of strange lights and missing soldiers, but he couldn't shake the unease creeping up his spine. A sudden rustle broke the silence. Price snapped to attention, scanning the nearby scrub with his flashlight. The beam swept across the barren desert, catching nothing but a startled hare darting away. He exhaled, shaking his head. "Get a grip, Price," he thought. The radio on his shoulder crackled to life, breaking the fragile quiet. "Echo 5, this is Central. Report status." Price pressed the transmit button. "Central, this is Echo 5. All clear on the west perimeter." "Over?" "Copy that, Echo 5. Stay sharp. We've got reports of unidentified movement near your sector. Could be nothing, but keep an eye out. Central out." Price's pulse quickened. He swept the area with his flashlight again, but the landscape remained desolate. The stars above were unnervingly bright, their light stark against the moonless sky. The kind of night that made the desert feel alive. Time crawled. Minutes felt like hours as he moved along his patrol route, boots crunching against the sandy gravel. He was halfway to the north tower when he saw it, a faint bluish light on the horizon, low to the ground. At first he thought it might be headlights, but there was no sound, no hum of an engine, a rumble of tires on the dirt. "Central, this is Echo 5, he said into the radio, his voice low. "I've got visual on an unknown light source, approximately 200 meters northwest of my position. No audible signature. Permission to investigate?" Silence. "Central, this is Echo 5, do you copy?" The radio hissed with static, no response. Price cursed under his breath. Fort Echo was notorious for spotty comms, but the timing felt all too convenient. The light grew brighter, pulsating rhythmically. Against his better judgment, Price approached, rifle at the ready. The glow cast eerie shadows over the desert terrain, and as he drew closer, he realized it wasn't just one light, it was several, arranged in a pattern too perfect to be natural. They hovered just above the ground, slowly rotating. Price stopped, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. But something compelled him forward, a strange pull that felt both physical and psychological. The air grew heavy, pressing down on him like a thick, invisible fog. His breathing quickened as his heart hammered against his ribs. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cracking. "Identify yourself?" No answer, only the deep hum that now filled the air, vibrating in his chest. Suddenly, the lights shot upward, forming a ring high above him. Price staggered back, eyes wide, as the hum grew louder, morphing into an almost melodic resonance. The floodlights on the perimeter flickered wildly, then died altogether, plunging the desert into near total darkness, save for the eerie glow overhead. Then he saw them. Silhouettes emerged beneath the light stall, impossibly slender figures with elongated limbs and featureless faces. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, as if gliding rather than walking. Price raised his rifle, his training kicking in. "Stop. Don't come any closer." He barked, but his voice was swallowed by the hum, which was now so loud it made his teeth vibrate. The figures ignored his warning, closing the distance. Price fired a warning shot, but the bullet vanished into the air, as if swallowed by the darkness. Panic set in as he felt his feet leave the ground. He was being lifted, drawn upward toward the ring of lights. He thrashed and screamed, but his body betrayed him, frozen in place. The last thing he saw before everything went black was one of the figures tilting its head, as if studying him. Then a blinding flash consumed the world. When Price opened his eyes, he wasn't on the ground anymore. He wasn't even on Earth. Private First Class Price awoke to blinding light, so intense he squeezed his eyes shut against it. His head throbbed as if it had been split open, and his body felt heavy, sluggish, as though he were submerged in a thick liquid. Slowly, cautiously, he cracked his eyes open again. The light dimmed, revealing his surroundings. He was in a room, a vast, seamless expanse of white, its walls curved and without any discernible edges or corners. The air was unnaturally still, neither warm nor cold, and there was a faint hum, constant and low-pitched, that seemed to vibrate through the floor and into his bones. Price pushed himself up from the smooth surface beneath him, struggling to find his balance. His rifle was gone. His gear was gone. Even his dog tags, which never left his neck, were missing. He was clad only in his fatigues, the fabric feeling alien against his skin. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing faintly before being swallowed by the hum. His breath quickened. "Stay calm, stay sharp," he told himself, but the mantra felt hollow in the oppressive silence. Then he saw a figure standing at the far end of the room, barely visible through the shimmering light. It was one of the beings he'd seen before, tall and impossibly thin, its limbs elongated and inhuman. The featureless face was blank yet unnervingly expressive, as though it were watching him with some unseen eyes. Price instinctively raised his hands in a defensive posture, though he knew he was hopelessly unarmed. "What do you want?" he shouted, his voice tinged with equal parts anger and fear. The figure tilted its head, the motion unnervingly slow, almost curious. Then, without moving its legs, it glided toward him. Price stumbled back, his heart pounding in his ears. The hum grew louder as it approached, pressing into his skull like an unbearable weight. "Stay back!" he yelled, his voice cracking. But the figure didn't stop. Instead, it raised one elongated hand and gestured an intricate motion that was somehow calming and menacing at the same time. Price froze, his body suddenly paralyzed. He could only watch as the being drew closer, its blank face inches from his own. Then the world shattered. Images flooded Price's mind, so vivid and overwhelming that he couldn't tell where he ended, and the visions began. He saw Earth from above, its blue-green surface shrinking, as if he were being pulled away at impossible speed. He saw endless stars, swirling galaxies, and strange, alien worlds teeming with unrecognizable forms of life. He saw himself. The image was warped and surreal, his body dissected into layers of muscle, bone, and sinew, as though he were being studied. He felt no pain, but the sensation of being so thoroughly exposed was horrifying. Price tried to scream, but his mouth wouldn't move. The figure reached out, placing its hand, or what passed for a hand, against his forehead. The moment it made contact, the flood of images ceased. His mind was left reeling, and he felt an unbearable emptiness, as though something vital had been ripped away. "Why? Why are you doing this?" he gasped when his voice finally returned. Tears stung his eyes, though he didn't remember crying. The figure didn't respond, but its head tilted again, as if pondering his words. Then, a voice not spoken, but implanted directly into his thoughts. It was neither male nor female, human nor machine, but something beyond comprehension. Observe, adapt, understand. The words or impressions seared into his mind. Before he could respond, the room shifted violently. The walls rippled like liquid, and the figure dissolved into the brightness. Price stumbled, his balance failing as the hum reached a deafening crescendo. When he regained his footing, the room had changed. The sterile white was gone, replaced by a strange amalgamation of familiar and alien. A crude imitation of Fort Echo's barracks stood in front of him, its angles distorted and walls pulsating faintly with a soft blue light. The air smelled wrong, a mix of ozone and something metallic. "Price!" a voice shouted, sharp and desperate. He whipped around to see another soldier, a man he recognized instantly. It was Private Walker, his bunkmate, who had gone missing 3 weeks earlier. "Walker?" Price stammered, his voice trembling. The sight of his friend, pale and gaunt, filled him with equal parts relief and dread. Walker's eyes were bloodshot, his movements jerky, unnatural. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "They're in my head, Price," Walker said, clutching his temples. "They won't stop. They won't let me." His words broke off in a strangled gasp as his body convulsed and he collapsed to his knees. Price ran to him, but before he could reach his friend, Walker's form flickered like a glitching hologram and vanished. "Walker!" Price shouted, his voice echoing in the strange, pulsating chamber. He spun in place, searching for any sign of his friend, but the space was empty again. The hum returned, louder than ever, and Price collapsed, clutching his ears. A voice invaded his thoughts once more, but this time it wasn't alien. "Price, it's time to wake up." It was Walker's voice, faint and strained. Before Price could process the words, the light flared again, blinding him. When the brightness receded, he was somewhere else entirely. A vast, metallic hallway stretched out before him, dimly lit by the same blue glow. His body felt lighter, his movements faster, more fluid. He wasn't alone. Dozens of figures, human and alien, moved purposefully in the distance, their forms flickering between solid and translucent. The realization hit him like a truck. He wasn't being studied anymore. He was part of something much, much bigger. Private First Class Price stumbled forward into the metallic hallway, his boots clanging faintly against the strange, smooth floor. The air buzzed with an unnatural energy, and the walls pulsed with faint blue light, alive with patterns that shifted like flowing water. Ahead, the figures moved with a purpose, their forms flickering between solid and incorporeal, as though they existed in two realities at once. Price's mind raced, fragments of images and sensations from the white room still clawing at his consciousness. He had no idea where he was, but every instinct screamed at him to keep moving. His legs felt lighter, his steps quicker, as though the very air around him pushed him forward. He followed the figures at a distance, staying in the shadows where the faint glow of the walls didn't reach. As he approached a branching corridor, the hum that had become a constant companion grew louder, more oppressive. He pressed his hands to his ears, trying to block it out, but the sound wasn't external, it was inside him, vibrating in his skull. Observe, adapt, understand. The alien voice cut through his thoughts again, colder this time, more forceful. Price gritted his teeth, refusing to let it consume him. He turned a corner and froze. Before him lay a massive chamber, its ceiling stretching impossibly high. The walls shimmered with a translucent membrane, revealing a vast, star-streaked void beyond. In the center of the room was a platform, and on it stood a series of pods, sleek, metallic coffins, each emanating a faint glow. Inside the closest pod, he saw a figure. It was Walker. Walker, Price hissed, rushing toward the pod. His friend's eyes were closed, his body slack, suspended in a viscous, translucent liquid. The faint rise and fall of Walker's chest confirmed he was still alive. Price placed a hand on the pod's surface, searching for some way to open it, but the material was seamless, unyielding. "Hold on, buddy. I'll get you out of here," he whispered, though he had no idea how. As he scanned the pod for a release mechanism, the hum intensified, and the lights in the chamber flickered. Price turned to see the tall alien figures entering the room, gliding toward him with eerie grace. Their featureless faces seemed to bore into him, and the oppressive hum became a deafening roar. Price backed away from the pod, his hands raised in a futile gesture of surrender. "I don't know what you want from me," he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of the sound. "Let us go." The figures paused, tilting their heads in unison. The hum receded, replaced by a strange melodic resonance that filled the chamber. Price's heart pounded as he realized they were communicating not with words, but with sound, a language of vibrations and frequencies. One of the figures stepped forward, raising a slender arm. A shimmering beam of light shot from its hand, engulfing Price. He flinched, expecting pain, but instead felt a strange warmth, a pull that seemed to probe the depths of his mind. Memories flashed before him, his childhood, his first day at boot camp, the night he stood under the lights on the perimeter. They weren't just watching him. They were taking something, understanding something. "Why us?" Price muttered, his voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this?" The melodic resonance shifted, and a thought not his own entered his mind. "You are the bridge." The words filled him with a chilling sense of finality, though he didn't understand their full meaning. Before he could respond, the light around him vanished, and the aliens moved toward the pod containing Walker. One by one, they approached the other pods, their movements deliberate, ritualistic. "No," Price shouted, lunging toward the closest figure. His hand passed straight through it, as though it were made of smoke. He stumbled, falling to his knees as the hum returned, louder than ever. The chamber began to ripple, the walls dissolving into blinding light. Price shielded his eyes, but the sensation of weightlessness overtook him again, pulling him upward. He screamed, reaching for anything to anchor himself, but there was nothing, just the endless, searing light. Then, silence. Price woke with a gasp, the desert air cold against his skin. He was lying on the hard ground, his rifle a few feet away, its barrel glinting under the weak light of the rising sun. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream, a vivid nightmare brought on by too many sleepless nights. But as he sat up, he noticed the burn marks in the sand where the lights had been. The air still carried a faint metallic tang, and his fatigues were damp with a viscous liquid that glistened faintly in the morning light. "Walker," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He scrambled to his feet, scanning the horizon. The base was visible in the distance, its floodlights still flickering. He reached for his radio, but it was dead. Price stumbled toward the base, his legs heavy with exhaustion. When he reached the perimeter, he was met by a group of soldiers, their faces pale with confusion and fear. "Price?" one of them said, his voice trembling. We thought you were gone." "Where's Walker?" Price demanded, gripping the soldier's arm. "Did he come back?" The soldier shook his head. "Walker's been missing for weeks." "You know that." "Price, what happened out there?" Price looked back toward the desert, the sun rising over the barren expanse. He didn't answer. The images, the voices, the chamber, they were all burned into his mind, more real than the ground beneath his feet. But one thought lingered above all others, chilling him to his core. "You are the bridge." Price turned back toward the base, his fists clenched. He didn't know what the aliens had done to him or why they had let him go. But he knew one thing for certain. They weren't finished with him yet.